YouTube. I won't bore you too much with an intro, but these are 4 things that stand out to me that beginners do when they're playing guitar. Often this happens when people don't take lessons. They don't have someone looking over them, correcting what they're doing. They're learning from YouTube videos. And so since you're learning from YouTube videos, I wanted to give you a video that would help you to keep your form well. Becoming a more advanced guitarist often doesn't even have to do with how many chords you learn. There are plenty of great songs you can play with the basic chords. Learning chords are good, but what will make you stand out as a more advanced guitarist is getting your technique down. And these are 4 basic techniques that make a world of difference. They aren't hard to learn. They just take a little bit of time to get down, get into your muscle memory, and they make a huge difference to your playing. So I'll start over here. The first thing is to make sure that you keep your wrist loose. When you're playing, your playing should not look like this. Oh, I can't even do it. Where all the movement is coming from your elbow. Your wrist creates the movement. Your elbow follows along with it, if necessary. So what I like to do is shake out my wrist. Oh, don't let your pick fall out of your hand. It's a little hard when you're like doing that, but it helps actually if you have your pick in your hand while you're kind of shaking out your wrist before you play, then you'll get used to not having it fly out of your hand, because sometimes it does. It happens to me sometimes too when I'm playing. Have your finger go down the pick, and then your thumb going across it like that. Your 3 other fingers are open, not trying to grip the pick. When I first started learning guitar, I held my pick like this, and it was not good. As you can see, that doesn't really provide a whole lot of dexterity, and then my fingers get in the way, and it was just bad. So nice, firm but loose in a way grip on your pick. And then all your playing should come from your wrist. This will provide you more. So like for example with these, as I'm playing with a more slow, light strumming, I'm not moving my elbow at all. As I speed up the strumming, I'm still not moving my elbow. Sometimes if I do really like long, wide strumming, then I will move my elbow only out of necessity. But ultimately, all of my beat, my picking pattern, it's all coming from my wrist. The wrist provides a lot of precision. It's also easier to move around. Even if you're moving it without playing, trying to move your elbow back and forth versus trying to move your wrist back and forth, you have a lot more ability in your wrist than you do in your elbow, which takes quite a bit of arm strength to be moving back and forth all the time. Your arm's going to get tired quickly. And I've had people tell me that, well, this is just the way that they like to play. They just like to move their elbow and rather than their wrist. And you can play guitar any way you want, but if you want to play it as well as you possibly can, then you learn these techniques. So that's one thing. 2, when you're strumming, don't do that. You see how, if you can see on the camera, when I'm doing that, I'm digging my pick into the strings. That's a common mistake I see with beginners. Don't dig it into the strings. You want to lightly brush over it. I'll often even use the edge of my pick rather than using the front of it, depending on what techniques you're doing. Sometimes you do want to go perpendicular into the strings, but with just plain simple strumming, I'll often even just use especially because right now I'm using a heavy pick. I prefer mediums, but for now I have a heavy pick, so when you're using the heavy especially, you need the pick to be loose, it should move with your strumming. You don't want it to fall out, but you don't want a super firm grip on it so it won't even move. Loosen your fingers, and often on the edge of your pick, or on the edge of your pick rather than straight up and down. That's 2. Third technique that will help your playing is change your strings. Change your strings once every 2 to 4 weeks, depending on how often you're playing. If you are using strings that are coated, then you can change them much less frequently. That's a good option. They're a little more expensive, but then you're not buying strings all the time. So ultimately, you probably do save money, especially if you're playing often. The coated strings are good. If you are playing a new guitar and you haven't changed your strings since getting it, change your strings. People don't realize how much of a difference it makes to have new strings until I go and change it for them, and they're like, wow, this sounds so much brighter and clearer, and it makes a difference. It also helps to not have your fingers getting dirty while you're playing because your strings are a year old. I can tell. If I'm watching someone playing, I can tell if they haven't changed their strings. It always stands out to me, and immediately it gives me a clue about their skill level. So change your strings often. The 4th has to do with your left hand, or if you're a lefty, your right hand. When you're playing the chords, you don't want to be playing like this. It mutes them, it makes them buzz. These next couple tips are all about making a clear sound without any buzzing noises. If you play piano, you do the same thing in piano. You want to curl your fingers over the strings. This is probably the same with a lot of instruments, actually, but piano is the only one that I think of where I've learned technique. Curl your fingers so that each finger should land perpendicular onto the string. You should be able to just come it on there. That helps with the buzz. It also helps if I'm doing hammer-ons, if you've learned hammer-ons, it's a lot harder to do them if I'm coming at it from an angle. At it straight down. Makes it much easier. So curl over your fingers and make sure you're playing as close to the fret as possible without being on top of the fret. If I'm playing my G over here, I have to push down really hard to even try and get a clear sound, and then your fingers are going to get worn out pretty quick, especially if you're a new player. Play as close to the fret as possible to create a brighter sound. And that just takes practice, especially if you're switching chords. You might be switching them quickly and land in the wrong spots. Then your playing's not coming out clear. So you may need to practice just going back and forth, switching the chords, and making sure every time you switch them, asking yourself, are my fingers right next to the fret? And as soon as you have the muscle memory down of making sure you know that is where I put my fingers when I'm playing that chord, then you won't have to think about it anymore. So practicing that, getting into your muscle memory, and then you'll have very clear sounding chords. So those are my four tips, 4 advice that I pretty much always have to give to my students when I have students. Things that stand out to me quite frequently. I come across this kind of stuff with watching guitarists, and it's not hard to learn these techniques. It doesn't take a lot of time, and rather than spending hours trying to perfect a song where you're doing all these things and making it hard for yourself, learn the techniques, get your form down, and you'll be able to learn songs and play them well much quicker than you could have otherwise. Well, I hope this helps. I know not everyone can afford lessons or have the time for lessons, and often you're left learning things on YouTube and no one's there to correct you. And this is pretty much usually what I'm correcting my students on. So I hope that this can help you as you're learning guitar and help you to teach yourself. Make sure you're, even I, after playing guitar for years, I will still watch guitarists and kind of see what they're doing, and compare to my own playing, and just constantly watching to see what you can do to improve. So yeah, I hope this helps, and good luck learning guitar. Bye.